Hello, everyone. Today I am going to be going through some essentials for engaging students in climate science learning virtually. So as we all know, uh, right now we are in a place where so much of our lives are happening online. And I know here in San Diego, they've decided that next semester for the students, they will remain teaching online. So this has never been more important for us to take time to sort of just walk through some of the essentials and basics and a little bit more stuff we can do to make how we're teaching our students virtually engaging for them. There is no need for science and climate science to now become something that students just need to read about or boring stuff like that, right? We can still make this fun and engaging for them. And I'm going to just walk through first some essentials about how to make virtual teaching work smoothly for you and for your students. And then I'll go into some specifics about how we can do that with climate science and atmospheric chemistry specifically. Okay, so let's jump right in to some of the first things we should talk about, which is our technical basics, right? Technical setup. So the first thing we want to make sure we talk about is our visual, and this mostly comes down to lighting. So right now I have wonderful natural lighting occurring for me because it is the middle of the day when I am doing this. And so I've positioned myself so that I'm facing a window, and that creates really nice lighting. So if that's possible, do that, or make sure that the light is behind wherever your camera is or your computer so that it's shining directly on you. What we don't want to do is have a light right behind us because that tends to create shadows, and you can see how it's changed the way this video looks, right? When we have this light on right behind us, and this can become even worse if you're sitting in a room that doesn't have natural lighting, right? So that's just number one basic, is make sure that the lighting that you have is in front of you, behind the camera. The other thing is, you'll see behind me that I've got a gray background. So this is nothing technical. This is just actually a sheet that I have tacked up on the wall. But what it does is creates a really nice, smooth and dark background to present myself and anything that I'm bringing with me into the video. You can see it much better, and there's a lot less glare than there is against some like a painted wall or a white wall, etc. So two super easy things to do to set yourself up with that visual happening really nicely. The second thing that's really important for our technical setup is audio. Now, audio is actually more important than video. If you're ever having trouble with your connection or things like that, turn your video off and just stick with that audio. There's research that shows that that's what people are most interested in and helps them stay engaged the best, is if your voice is very clear and comes through without being garbled or delayed. So it's better to just get rid of the video altogether and talk through whatever you're doing rather than having jumbled audio. And if you can just use usually I just use my computer audio, but if you are super fancy, right, you can get mics and things like that to make it better. But usually the computer audio is just fine. And the next thing that I want to talk about when we specifically are doing this kind of virtual learning is the chat box. So when interacting with a group of students all at once in a forum like this, it's really chaotic if you try to have all of them just jump out and answer things with their voice. Well, sometimes this is important and it's what you want. To remain engaged and keep the conversation flowing, using that chat box can be really, really helpful. So when you throw out your questions to see where the students are at in their learning, just have them respond in there, and then they can feel heard without it being super disruptive. This is also really good if that student also is having trouble with their internet connection, right? So they can't have good audio or video happening, but they can definitely participate with you through the chat box. It makes it more accessible. And it's just a really good way to engage with a larger group of students all at once, rather than having them try to shout out the answers or trying to call on them. But when you do use the chat box, the other thing that I'll mention is it's really important to create space for the people to write. So make sure that your pauses are longer than you would think they need to be when you're waiting for answers. It's okay to just sit there in silence for sometimes, right? I know that can be kind of awkward, but it gives them time to write their answers. And obviously this is dependent on the age of the students that you're teaching. The super young learners might not be able to use the chat box function as well as our older students would be able to. All right, so those are the couple of things I wanted to go through technical wise. And next we'll go into some more specifics about teaching and teaching with climate science. Alrighty, so the next part of this is what are we going to teach the students virtually? And I think we need to take time to decide on how and what we're going to be teaching in this new sort of like way. Things that we would bring in as demonstrations for the students might not work as well as they would in the classroom because we are so disconnected from them. They're not in the same physical space as us. So when we choose what kinds of activities to teach, I think it's really important that we choose activities that can be done with normal household materials, right? There is so much science and STEM activities that can be done with things that nearly every person has in their house. And so really take the time to think through those activities, do a bit of Googling. There's many activities like this available on the Climate Science Alliance website as well as on the CASE website, where you can just see the materials that are available and if that's something that you think your students would have access to. So that's number one, because we want to be able to do these activities together with the student. You want to be working on your experiment at the same time as the student is doing theirs to create that sense of connectedness that is missing in this way that we're having to deal with everything right now. And so that's just number one. We want to do it that way. The other thing is that in addition to using the chat box, you can also add on polls, a little bit of a level up into depending on the type of platform you're using to teach. But that's a good way to get all of the students participating in a way where they don't have to speak up. So you can get those students who are quieter to be involved in what's happening and see their opinions and perspectives reflected in those polls. So when you're asking them, a question about the activity or what they thought about the activity, did they enjoy it or not, those kinds of things you can use as polls. And the last thing that I want to talk about in terms of like what are we teaching students is that this is actually a really cool opportunity to get them involved in activities that can be done online or using more online resources. I'll go into a couple examples that we can use for climate science, but there's lots of these out there. And what it means is you could have all of your students doing similar online activities together. So this is things like different kinds of, science games or interactive videos and things like that that have that are there for students to use for learning different science topics. Many of these are free online. Different kind of governmental or research center websites have lots of free resources. And the most important thing is to remember to make this fun. This is a crazy time, unbelievable, unrealistic time for everybody. And so when we're doing these activities, really important to maintain the joyousness of these things and not get too serious. We want our students to be learning, but they will not be learning if their level of stress that they're experiencing is so high. And so let's try to use this time and these fun activities to bring them back to a place of play, of fun, and learning at the same time. And I really think that these like hands-on science activities have the potential to be that place for students to sort of just disconnect from the rest of what's happening and focus on doing something fun together with their peers and with you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go through a couple specific hands-on interactive activities that you can do with students to specifically teach climate science and atmospheric chemistry. And so it's really good to sort of preface all of this learning with a bit of maybe reading or discussion about these general concepts. You can find more of this information for the background on the CASE website. But I'm just not going to go into that right now. What I want to do right now is show you some of these hands-on activities and how I would present them in a way that is hopefully fun for you and for the students. Okay, so the first one is one of our standard awesome activities that everybody loves, and that is the cloud in a bottle experiment. And so this activity teaches the students what you need to make clouds and how they form. And so I always like to preface this by asking students, what are the things that you need to make a cloud? And I tell them there are 3 things actually. There's 3 things that you need to make a cloud. What are they? And I'll ask the students to tell me. And so this is a chance where you can use that chat box feature, get the students to sort of start guessing items that they think are needed to make a cloud. They will almost always say water, right? Yes, definitely we need water to make clouds. That's one of them. The next thing that sometimes people will guess, depending on how much background you've given them, is that we need aerosols. And I often say, so what's an aerosol again, right? So an aerosol is any tiny bit of stuff that is floating in the air. Can be dust, can be salt, could be little tiny bits of your skin floating in the air. And the next thing, the third thing that we need to make a cloud is actually a change in pressure. Right? So we need the pressure to change and the air pressure specifically to change. And you can tell the students about how when we think of our big atmosphere that surrounds the earth, as you go higher and higher up in the atmosphere, we get a change in pressure, right? And that's how those clouds form. So we're going to make all of this happen. We're going to make this cloud form using water, aerosols, and a change in pressure. And we're going to make all of that happen in this bottle. Right? And so what you need to do is fill the bottle up about 3/4 of the way full. And it definitely needs a lid as well. The bottle needs a lid, so I'm going to unscrew it. And for this activity, we will be using matches. So this is not an activity that young students should do alone, but if there is a parent available to help them, they can definitely do this in the house with parental supervision. So you're going to take the match, light it up. There we go. And then you're going to stick the match into the bottle and put the lid on. Now we put the match in there because that is our aerosols. So we've got water, we put in the match, which creates smoke and ash, which are those aerosols. And then the last thing we need to make a cloud is that change in pressure. And so we're gonna do that by squeezing and letting go of the bottle. So when we squeeze the bottle, we create high pressure. And then when we let go, we have low pressure, and you can see that the cloud has formed in the top of the bottle. And if I squeeze again, high pressure, the cloud goes away, let go, low pressure, and the cloud forms. So this is a great demonstration of how clouds form and the things that you need to make it happen. And it's something that the students can get their hands on and do right alongside you. So there's one example. And I'll go ahead and go into our next example activity right now. All right, so the next activity that's really easy to do alongside your students and explores this idea of our air and aerosols and pollution is creating a particle collector or an aerosol particle collector. And there, you can just preface this talking about how scientists actually use fancy, like pretty scientific instruments to collect particles and study them. And so this is what we're going to do on our own level that we can use today. And so this is what one of those particle collectors might look like, right? So all you're going to need for this activity is a piece of paper, a pencil, and you'll need some clear tape. Packing tape works the best. And so you can walk your students through cutting out the different shapes that they want to use as the place where they collect their aerosol particles. And then they will place the tape sticky side up so that the stickiness is what's going to collect the aerosol particles from the air. And then they can go ahead and put that particle collector up somewhere in their house or around their house, and they can learn about the types of aerosols that are collected or the number of aerosols. And so the students can go ahead and do this for several different locations or for several different time periods. And at the end, you can come back together after this experiment is over. You know, maybe you do it over a couple of days or over one day in different areas. And then look at what you collected and discuss. Did the particles change depending on the location or the time? Are there different colors of particles, different sizes? Are there some places where you didn't really see anything? Are there some places where you saw a lot of stuff? Right? So this opens up the discussion to talk about the different kinds of aerosols and how pollution is different in different locations for a huge variety of reasons. And the very last activity that I want to talk to you about is something that's actually available to you online, right? I mentioned using these online tools as a way of taking the learning further, using this virtual space we live in right now as actually an opportunity instead of a challenge. And that is a air quality challenge that we have placed onto the San Diego Unified School District website. And so on there, it uses air quality sensors that are positioned throughout the county, as well as the governmental air quality website, to help students explore the air quality in their region. And you can do all of this from home online. But what it also does is it facilitates a connection to these other places. Right? So you may be sitting at home, not being able to go all the places you wish you could go, but by looking at the air quality in different regions around the country or around the world even, you can explore this like in your head, right? And we can go places in our imagination as we explore the different locations and their air quality. And I'll put a link in the video as well as with materials that go along with this, so you can go ahead and check it out. But it's on the San Diego Unified School District's site as one of a science challenge that's available to students this summer. And I really hope that you check it out as it creates the next level, right? So we do some hands-on experiments together, we explore our local environment, and you can take it to this wider scale where we look at the whole world and go beyond the four walls that we are currently kind of feeling trapped by. Well, I hope that was useful. If you have any questions or you'd like to discuss further how you can get some more of these climate science and atmospheric chemistry teaching materials, or if you would like in the future to be involved with CASE educational activities, there are many, many opportunities for you and your students to work with the scientists at CASE, as well as to do projects that feed into some of the CASE research. So you can email me. I'll put my email address into the video as well as into the information for this video. And I hope that everyone stays well and is taking great care.